This episode of Pat Answers Archives is brought to you by... It started in a normally quiet, upscale suburb north of Chicago. A murder so grisly, so violent, it caused hard-nosed, experienced street cops to turn away in disgust. But that was just the beginning. There was more, so much more, hidden below the surface. Murder, mayhem, and arms dealing, in a plot to eliminate an international leader. It takes you on a non-stop thrill ride from Skokie, Illinois, to the Missouri Ozarks, and finally culminating in Sin City. Book number 1 in the Tales from the Deep State series, A Wake of Vultures, by author Patrick C. Cantor Sr., available now for $16.95, plus $5 shipping. Order today at patsanswers.com/blog website by clicking on the Store tab. Order it today. In January of 1967, I was working for Standard T Chemical, a subsidiary of Montgomery Ward Paint Division, in their developmental lab at 26th Street and Federal Avenue. The lab was on the second floor of the building, set back a ways so that there was a flat roof outside the east windows that I used as a patio on nice days to eat my lunch. On Tuesday, January 24th, 1967, the noon temperature was 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and I enjoyed the balmy weather while listening to the noon broadcast of Paul Harvey News and eating my lunch. But the temperature began to fall the next day with the passage of a cold front. At 5:02 a.m. on Thursday the 26th, it began to snow. Nothing remarkable about that. It was January in Chicago, and besides, 4 inches of snow had been predicted. My wife and I, along with our 18-month-old daughter and newborn son, were living on the first floor of a 2-story frame apartment building at 117th and Michigan Avenue in the Roseland neighborhood of Chicago. I had seen the weather report at 10 p.m. on Wednesday and decided I probably should get an early start since my commute along the Calumet Expressway to the Dan Ryan and north to 26th Street usually took about 45 minutes in rush hour. I left the house around 6 a.m., thinking I should have plenty of time to get to work by my start time at 8:30. The 1960 4-door Ford Fairlane 500 that we had taken over from my father-in-law was built like a tank, and I had snow tires. So even though there was already almost 3 inches of snow on the ground, when I left home I felt confident I would have no trouble getting to work. I was wrong. The commute that normally took 45 minutes took 3.5 hours. I was an hour late getting into the lab, but even at that, I was one of the few who made it at all. But it kept snowing. All through this miserable Thursday and into early Friday morning. At about 1 p.m. on Thursday, the lab director received a phone call from the factory superintendent telling him that the storm was worsening and that everybody should go home. My Ford was one of only a few cars in the company lot, which by this time had accumulated almost a little over 6 inches of snow. The other employees decided they were not going to chance driving, and they would take public transportation home. I had faith in my driving skills, and as I said earlier, the Ford was built like a tank. After sweeping the snow off the car and shoveling a small path in front of the 4 wheels, I began the odyssey of my journey home. The driving conditions were like something out of a disaster movie. The usual 5-minute drive from the factory to the Dan Ryan Expressway entrance took 20 minutes, and that was the quickest and easiest part of the trip. Once on the expressway, it was literally stop-and-go driving, headed south, and after 2 hours I'd only made it from 26th Street to 55th Street, where the traffic came to a complete stop. I managed to get on the shoulder of the road and creep my way up the westbound exit and up to the surface streets. I reasoned that if I stayed on routes that were used by the Chicago Transit Authority buses, I would have the best chance to get through. I made a right turn on Garfield Boulevard and headed for Halsted Street. It was slow going, but I made Halsted in about 20 minutes. I turned left on Halsted and headed south, where I got as far as 69th Street, where, once again, there was no possibility of getting any further. People were starting to abandon their cars in the roadway, and the CTA buses were unable to get around them. I managed to get westbound on 69th Street by driving over the sidewalk at the corner. My plan was to try to make it to Ashland Avenue, which was another main bus thoroughfare. When I finally got there, I could see that there was no way I was going to be able to continue south on Ashland, so I pressed further west to Damon Avenue. When I got to Damon, surprisingly, there were few cars, and I was able to make the left turn to go south again. Ironically, this was the neighborhood where I grew up. The old family home was located about 2 blocks west of Damon at 70th Place. So far, Damon had been my best choice, and I was able to get to 87th Street, where I had to make a decision. If I turned west and tried to make it to Western Avenue, which was a heavily traveled route, I would have to make it up a fairly steep hill, with a forest preserve on either side. The hill was one of 3 in the forest preserve system that had a toboggan slide built into it, and I wasn't sure that the Ford would make it. The other choice was to head east and hope that Ashland Avenue was passable enough to continue south. Making the left turn on 87th Street, I crept slowly eastward toward Ashland. Although there were a number of cars, trucks, and buses abandoned, I was finally able to make the right turn and once again head south. As I made the turn, I saw that the gas gauge was reading near empty, and I was afraid that I would run out of gas before I got home. It was now 5:30 p.m., and I had been fighting my way through this blizzard for 4.5 hours, and night had fallen. I was getting concerned about being stranded in a car, out of gas, and in a blizzard. It has been said that God protects drunks and fools. I can guarantee I was stone cold sober at that point. As far as the fool part, well, let's just say I did question my sanity. When I got to 95th Street, I had another decision to make. 95th was a bus route, but at that point, Ashland terminated and took a slight leftward jog to the southeast as Vincennes Avenue. It was not a bus route, but the Rock Island Rail line ran alongside to the west, and for some reason, the railroad was running a conga line of snowplows southeast on Vincennes. Thankfully, I got in between 2 of the snowplows and was able to get all the way south to 115th Street with little difficulty. I was, however, getting very concerned now, as my gas gauge was almost pinned to the left. I had to keep trying to get home, so I turned left to go eastbound on 115th Street. I was trying to will the Ford to make it home. I got to Michigan Avenue and made the right turn southbound, headed for 117th Place. At 116th Street, the engine coughed, and I was sure it was going to quit on me. Come on, baby, just 2 more blocks. As I made the corner of 117th Place and Michigan Avenue, I saw that, amazingly, there was a parking space right at the corner. I cut the wheels right, and as the motor quit, momentum allowed me to coast into the parking space. It continued to snow until it finally stopped at 10:10 a.m. on Friday. By the end, 23 inches of snow covered Chicago and the suburbs, the largest single snowfall in the city's history. Thousands were stranded in offices, in schools, in buses. About 50,000 abandoned cars and 800 Chicago Transit Authority buses littered the streets and expressways. All most people wanted to do was to get home. The blizzard of 67 proved the wisdom behind the Chicago saying, "If you don't like the weather, just wait a minute." Only 2 days before, the temperature had reached a record 65 degrees. Generally, winter is the time that tries the soul of even the most devoted Chicagoan. Temperatures frequently fall below zero in January and February, and battles with big snows are a regular, but thankfully not annual, occurrence. The paralyzing strength of the 67 storm suspended normal routines for days. The latticework of stranded cars, trucks, and buses plugged roads. It was great to be a child during the blizzard of 67. There were mountains of snow to play in, and plenty of time to play in them because the schools were closed for several days. It was mid-March before 117th Place was plowed, and I could get a can of gas and get the old Ford started again. This has been Pat Answers Archives. Join us again next time, won't you? Pat Answer Archives is brought to you by our online store at patsanswers.com/blog. Click on the Store tab. Check us out today. We thank you for watching.
That's all, folks.